They left me with a crumbling cabin in the woods, and my brother got a sprawling mansion. I thought I knew my family, but I was dead wrong. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. I'm Nora Lynn, in my early 20s, practical and determined, though no one seemed to notice. When I arrived at the cabin left to me, the smell of damp wood and the sight of broken windows hit me harder than I expected. Every corner whispered neglect, and it felt like my parents had forgotten I existed. Meanwhile, Caleb, my older brother, already moved into his mansion, throwing lavish parties and living the life I never imagined I could have. Growing up, I always knew my parents favored him. My accomplishments were brushed aside, and his mistakes were excused. Now, standing in the cabin, I realized how deeply that favoritism had hurt me. I could let it break me, or I could fight back. I decided to fight. I started small, cleaning, repairing, and learning skills I never thought I needed. I found old family savings tucked away in the attic, and letters hinting that my parents had secretly hoped I would inherit their resilience, even if not their wealth. With every plank I nailed, I felt stronger. Soon, I discovered Caleb's hidden misdeeds and began quietly planning. While he relied on arrogance and shortcuts, I built my life piece by piece, gaining respect and independence. Eventually, I exposed his wrongdoing, faced him calmly, and reclaimed my dignity. What I inherited wasn't money, but strength, patience, and a sense of justice that no mansion could buy. By the end, the broken cabin became my home and my victory, proving that even the overlooked can rise and turn betrayal into triumph. When I arrived near Caleb's mansion, laughter and music spilled into the night. He was hosting one of his grand parties, surrounded by friends who cheered him on while I stood unseen. The sight made a familiar ache resurface, memories of being overlooked while he was praised for everything, even the smallest things. I remembered when I spent hours helping Mom in the kitchen, only for her to compliment Caleb for trying once. I recalled school achievements quietly tucked away while Caleb's successes were celebrated like trophies. The sting of favoritism hit me harder now, seeing it play out in real life with his guests applauding him, unaware of the quiet struggles I endured. Anger and disappointment mingled with determination as I watched him laugh, oblivious to the effort it took for me just to survive. A thought began forming in my mind, subtle at first but growing stronger. If the world rewarded him for nothing, maybe it was time I showed them what I could do. I walked away that night with more than frustration, I carried a plan. The seed of revenge had been planted, and it felt alive and sharp, guiding every step I took back to the cabin. The cabin was colder than I expected, with drafts sneaking through every crack. Each day brought a new challenge, leaky pipes, rotting floorboards, and walls that seemed determined to crumble. I worked tirelessly, hauling wood, patching holes, and scrubbing years of neglect. Every small victory felt like a personal triumph, though exhaustion weighed on me constantly. Word traveled fast in the town. Neighbors whispered about the poor sibling who had inherited nothing but a falling-apart shack. Their pity stung, but it also fueled me. I refused to let their opinions define my worth. I learned quickly, picking up carpentry from old manuals, planting a small garden to stretch my food, and finding ways to save every dollar. Each skill became a tool, each effort a statement that I would not be invisible or powerless. Late at night, sitting by the flickering candlelight, I promised myself I wouldn't settle for mere survival. Caleb might have the mansion and the praise, but I would build a life that mattered on my own terms. Every splinter, every bruise, every exhausted sigh became proof that I was shaping something stronger than any house could offer. I reached out to the family lawyer, hoping for clarity, only to find Caleb had already been there, spinning stories that made me seem greedy and undeserving. His calm lies made it sound like the cabin was all I could ever hope for, and that nothing more was mine to claim. A hollow ache settled in my chest. I felt invisible, erased from the family I thought I knew. Every memory of favoritism returned, but now it was sharper, crueler, like a door slammed shut on any sense of fairness. Sitting alone in the dim cabin, I let the pain wash over me for a moment. Then anger began to replace it. If this was how my family saw me, if Caleb thought he could manipulate my life so easily, I wouldn't stay silent. A quiet determination formed, stronger than any fear. I told myself that day, if they treated me like this, I would rise above it. I would prove that being underestimated didn't mean being weak, and that betrayal could be met with strategy, patience, and resolve. The first flicker of revenge had been lit, and I would not let it die out. While clearing cobwebs from the attic, I stumbled upon a dusty box tucked in a corner. Inside, there were stacks of old bills and coins, long-forgotten savings my parents had hidden away. It wasn't much, but it felt like a secret gift meant for me, waiting to be discovered. With the money, I bought tools and supplies, and slowly began restoring the cabin. Each nail I hammered and each plank I replaced felt like reclaiming a part of myself that had been ignored for too long. The work was grueling, but every repaired wall and polished floor filled me with a quiet pride I hadn't known I could feel. Among the boxes, I found letters from my mother, faded and delicate. They spoke of strength, resilience, and the importance of carrying the family's spirit forward, not just its fortune. Her words sank in, and I realized that what truly mattered wasn't competing with Caleb or chasing wealth, it was proving to myself that I could thrive on my own terms. For the first time, I understood that revenge wasn't just about taking something from him. It was about showing courage, preserving dignity, and claiming the life I deserved. Every effort in the cabin became a symbol of my independence and determination, and a quiet excitement began to grow, knowing I was building more than a home, I was building myself. From a distance, I watched Caleb's mansion sparkle under chandeliers and the glow of expensive lanterns. Guests in elegant attire laughed and clinked glasses, completely oblivious to the struggles that surrounded me. I wasn't invited, society treated me like a ghost, invisible and irrelevant. Curiosity drew me closer, and I slipped into a shadowed corner, quietly observing. Conversations revealed more than I expected. Caleb had been diverting money meant for the family's legacy, spending it on his indulgences while keeping everyone else in the dark. The arrogance in his voice, the way he flaunted his wealth, made my blood boil. Seeing the truth unfold, I felt a surge of clarity. This was more than just jealousy or pain, this was wrongdoing I could not ignore. But I wouldn't rush in blindly. I needed a plan, a careful approach that would ensure he couldn't deny or escape the consequences. In that moment, I began to map out my strategy, thinking through every step, every detail. I wasn't just observing anymore, I was preparing. My resolve hardened. Caleb's arrogance had given me the information I needed, and I would use it with precision. The seeds of calculated revenge had been sown, and patience would be my strongest weapon. They left me with a crumbling cabin in the woods, and my brother got a sprawling mansion. I thought I knew my family, but I was dead wrong. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. I'm Nora Lynn, in my early 20s, practical and determined, though no one seemed to notice. When I arrived at the cabin left to me, the smell of damp wood and the sight of broken windows hit me harder than I expected. Every corner whispered neglect, and it felt like my parents had forgotten I existed. Meanwhile, Caleb, my older brother, already moved into his mansion, throwing lavish parties and living the life I never imagined I could have. Growing up, I always knew my parents favored him. My accomplishments were brushed aside, and his mistakes were excused. Now, standing in the cabin, I realized how deeply that favoritism had hurt me. I could let it break me, or I could fight back. I decided to fight. I started small, cleaning, repairing, and learning skills I never thought I needed. I found old family savings tucked away in the attic, and letters hinting that my parents had secretly hoped I would inherit their resilience, even if not their wealth. With every plank I nailed, I felt stronger. Soon, I discovered Caleb's hidden misdeeds and began quietly planning. While he relied on arrogance and shortcuts, I built my life piece by piece, gaining respect and independence. Eventually, I exposed his wrongdoing, faced him calmly, and reclaimed my dignity. What I inherited wasn't money, but strength, patience, and a sense of justice that no mansion could buy. By the end, the broken cabin became my home and my victory, proving that even the overlooked can rise and turn betrayal into triumph. I sent a carefully worded letter to the authorities, making sure every detail of Caleb's misuse of funds was documented. I didn't sign my name, keeping my involvement hidden, but I knew it would be enough to start an investigation. The news spread quickly. At one of his gatherings, whispers followed him, and questions about his integrity began to surface. His confident smile faltered as people he once impressed with ease started doubting him. I could see the discomfort in his posture, the subtle cracks in the armor of arrogance he always wore so proudly. Watching from a distance, I felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and restraint. The first blow had landed, and his dominance over family and society was shaken, but I didn't gloat openly. I had no desire to sink to his level. This was justice, not petty revenge. As the evening ended, I returned to the cabin with a quiet sense of accomplishment. The plan was working, and my patience was paying off. For the first time, I realized that careful, strategic action could achieve far more than anger ever could. My resolve strengthened. I was capable of shaping outcomes without losing myself, and the path ahead was mine to navigate with intelligence and poise. After the investigation, Caleb became restless, pacing through his mansion as if the walls themselves were closing in. He questioned friends and associates, accusing anyone who showed hesitation of betrayal. Every glance from a guest or servant seemed suspicious, and his usual charm twisted into irritation and fear. I remained unseen, watching quietly from my distance. I refused to interfere directly, letting his own doubts and arrogance do the work for me. Each anxious call he made and every sleepless night he endured only confirmed that the plan was unfolding exactly as it should. There was a strange satisfaction in knowing that the fear he had once instilled in me was now mirrored in his own life. The laughter and confidence that had made him untouchable were replaced by worry and regret. For the first time, he felt the vulnerability I had known for years, the sting of being overlooked, underestimated, and dismissed. Sitting in the quiet of my restored cabin, I allowed myself a small, calm smile. Patience had been my ally, and intelligence my weapon. The tables had turned, and the power I had been denied for so long was finally within my grasp. Watching him falter without lifting a finger felt more rewarding than any confrontation could have been. I found myself standing at the edge of Caleb's study, the place where he once ruled with ease. He looked up, startled, expecting perhaps a servant or a messenger, but not me. I didn't raise my voice or demand apologies, I simply met his gaze and began to speak. I told him about the lies, the favoritism, the choices he made thinking he was untouchable. I described the struggles he never noticed, the nights I spent building my life from nothing, and how his arrogance blinded him to the harm he caused. My words were steady, controlled, each one carrying the weight of years he had ignored me. For a moment, Caleb said nothing. I saw something shift in his expression, guilt, disbelief, and the realization that the walls of privilege he had depended on were crumbling. He understood, perhaps for the first time, the strength I had quietly cultivated, the resilience that no wealth or influence could diminish. I didn't wait for forgiveness or acceptance. I turned and left, feeling lighter, stronger. He remained behind, confronted with the consequences of his actions, aware of the family he had disrespected but powerless to reverse the damage. Standing outside in the sunlight, I felt a clarity and pride I had never known. I had faced betrayal, endured pain, and emerged unbroken, a force he could never underestimate again. The cabin, once cold and crumbling, had transformed into a warm, bustling place. Light spilled through repaired windows, and the scent of polished wood and fresh paint filled the air. I had turned the space into more than a home. It was a small hub where people came to learn, trade, and connect. Neighbors who had once whispered now stopped by openly, offering help, sharing stories, and even bringing materials or ideas to support my projects. Friends from nearby towns joined in, and together we built a network that celebrated hard work and honesty. My furniture business thrived, but more than that, it became a symbol of what could be achieved through determination and integrity. Each day, as I walked through the cabin's rooms, I felt a quiet satisfaction. The struggles, the betrayals, and the long nights had shaped me into someone capable of creating, nurturing, and inspiring. I didn't need recognition from Caleb or anyone else. My success was measured in the lives I touched and the community we had built together. The pain that once weighed me down now fueled a sense of accomplishment and peace. I realized that true triumph wasn't about getting even, it was about rising above, finding strength in adversity, and crafting a life that reflected my values. Standing in the center of everything I had built, I finally understood that growth, self-reliance, and moral victory could be far more powerful than revenge alone. Months later, news spread of Caleb's mansion going up for auction. The estate that had once symbolized his arrogance and entitlement was now available, a reminder of how quickly fortunes could change. I attended quietly, blending in among the crowd, and placed my bid. When the hammer fell and the property was mine, a calm satisfaction settled over me. I didn't keep it for myself. Instead, I transformed the mansion into a place where people could gather, learn, and receive support, classes for skills, workshops for young entrepreneurs, and spaces for neighbors to collaborate. Every room echoed with laughter and purpose, far removed from the emptiness of Caleb's former parties. Walking through the halls, seeing the impact on others, I felt a deep, unshakable pride. Justice hadn't been about revenge for its own sake, it had been about redirecting what was once misused towards something meaningful. Caleb's wealth and pride had crumbled, but my choices turned that loss into hope for many. It was a quiet, graceful victory, the kind that left no bitterness, only proof that patience, intelligence, and moral strength could reshape outcomes. I had reclaimed not just the mansion, but the power to turn betrayal into purpose, and the knowledge that true triumph came from lifting others while standing tall myself. Sitting quietly in the sunlit cabin one evening, I thought about everything I had endured, the favoritism that cut deep, the nights filled with doubt, and the careful steps I took to reclaim what was mine. Every challenge, every moment of pain had shaped me into someone stronger, more determined, and more aware of my own worth. I remembered Caleb's arrogance, the isolation I once felt, and the careful patience that allowed me to turn setbacks into opportunity. It wasn't just the victories that mattered, but the lessons learned along the way, the value of perseverance, the strength in staying true to oneself, and the quiet power of acting with purpose rather than rage. Looking around at the home I had built, the community I had nurtured, and the lives I had touched, a sense of peace settled over me. Material wealth had never been the goal, the real triumph lay in dignity, resilience, and justice earned through one's own efforts. I realized then that family wounds can linger, leaving scars that feel impossible to overcome. But rising from those ashes with patience, courage, and self-respect, that is the inheritance worth treasuring. I smiled, knowing that despite everything, I had claimed not just survival, but a life defined by strength, morality, and fulfillment. True victory, I understood, comes from honoring yourself while creating a better world around you.